Well, good Saturday morning. Thanks for tuning in to the Weather Channel. Will Annan along with Rick Griffin. Super hurricane over the eastern Pacific Ocean. Will it affect Southern California or the Southwest? Well, we'll try and give you a little bit better of a picture on what's going to be happening with that now and also at 50 past the hour. But Hurricane Linda, what a whopper.
Impressive storm and the strongest ever recorded in the eastern Pacific. The winds yesterday were 185 miles an hour sustained. Again, the forecast is for it to affect Southern California, but it would not be until the weekend is done. A couple days from now, if it does. So we'll keep you posted. That's one of our big weather stories today. Rest of the nation, looking pretty good. So let's check out the satellite picture. Now, there will be a few exceptions. You can see right around Kansas City, for instance, and parts of eastern Kansas, that there's some bright white clouds and a little bit of precipitation this morning. But those showers will be moving away, and even you folks will have sunshine before the day is out. You can see the fringes of Linda down there southwest of Baja California. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about Linda as the rest of the hour unfolds, particularly on the tropical update at 10 before the hour. Actually, the lower 48 today, fairly quiet as we have no major fronts except for a weak cold front that is passing now across North Dakota and Wyoming. Still a very impressive hurricane south of Baja California. In time, 2 or 3 days down the road, a much weaker hurricane or tropical storm or remnants thereof could affect Southern California. We'll keep you posted. Now on to the forecast for the lower 48.
Also down towards Columbia, Missouri, could be looking at some more rainfall there. The east in general, basically dry today. Should be a very, very nice day. Big arts fair going on today in the Atlanta region, right around Centennial Park. Should be no problems there. Nice fall-like temps early this morning. It should be rising into the low to middle 80s with low humidity for the most part this afternoon. Watch out come later on today. Could be looking at some stronger storms trying to organize over South Florida. And of course, you can see we'll be tracking Linda for the next couple of days. What's going to be happening with Linda? We do know for the next 2 days or so, it's going to be tracking to the northwest, then probably getting caught up in some southwesterly air aloft, which means some of those stronger winds may pull it back towards Southern California and into the southwestern corner of the country within the next 48 to 72 hours. Something to watch for because it could be looking at some moisture and a lot of it coming back into the southwestern part of the nation. Now here comes early morning tomorrow, and we can show you that by late...
There's been some slight weakening of Hurricane Linda. It still remains the most powerful hurricane ever observed in the eastern Pacific, with the brand new update indicating still 175 mile per hour maximum sustained winds. Wind gusts of 200 plus are still likely within that small area in the eye wall surrounding the center of extremely impressive Hurricane Linda. Latest position, 20.2 north, 113.5 west. The eye of the storm, about 285 miles or so southwest of Cabo San Lucas, right here on the southern tip of Baja California. And Linda continues to move northwest at about 14 miles an hour. Now that track may in time switch more to northerly and then potentially northeasterly. If that happens, a much weaker Hurricane Linda may have an effect, possibly a significant effect, on northwest Mexico and southern California and the southwest part of the United States the first half of next week. That is one possible scenario, and we must admit that many of the computer charts are recurving Linda or the remnants of Linda towards the southwestern part of the United States. So that it could very well be a top weather story as we get into the second half of the weekend and the early part of next week. Right now, Linda, very impressive here on the enhanced satellite picture with a very small eye, probably about 12 miles across. The convection surrounding the eye, perhaps not quite as intense as yesterday, but this is still a very impressive hurricane with 175 mile per hour sustained maximum winds just in the eye wall outside the center of Hurricane Linda. Of course, there's excellent outflow still over very warm waters at this point, moving off to the northwest at 14 miles per hour. Now let's go to the water vapor. And we get orientated here. This is Linda, of course, down off Baja California. Now watch up in this area because it's right here that we're seeing a dip in the jet stream develop, and this is a very important factor in what may happen with Linda over the next 3 or 4 days, because it is felt, and the computer charts are basically confirming this, that the dip in the jet stream winds of the low pressure trough will strengthen off the west coast, and as Linda moves on towards the northwest, eventually it will feel a southwesterly wind aloft that could change the track to more northerly, and then eventually northeasterly, and bring it into the southwestern United States. And now, of course, by the time if it were to reach Southern California, it'd be a much, much weaker system, perhaps tropical storm, Linda, or even weaker than that. But even so, even if it was a depression, let's say, it would bring copious amounts of tropical moisture. So it's possible that the main effect could be excessive rains in the southwest. If it moves very quickly into the southwest, even though the cool waters are there, it could maintain some strength. If it were to reach Southern California as a tropical storm, by the way, it would be the first time that that has happened since 1939. So, as you can tell, an extremely unusual occurrence, but something that is not out of the question as we head into the early part of next week. We have a live crew heading to Southern California to keep you updated. So we hope you'll stay tuned for the latest. David is developing in the mid-Pacific east of the Marianas Islands, and Oliva taking a little more of a northerly track, perhaps impacting southern Japan by late in the weekend as it diminishes in strength. It is no longer a super typhoon. Gulf of Mexico, pretty good shape. Right here are the leewards and the windwards. This is a flare-up, but it's probably in association with an upper low, which is in here, but we'll watch it closely. The Atlantic, Eastern Atlantic quiet, North Atlantic still being buffeted by Tropical Storm Erika at 39.1 north and 42.6 west. Maximum winds with Erika 50. Then it's moving east at 9, the pressure 1,000 millibars. Stick around, your local forecast is next, and then much more on Linda and the rest of the weather on WeatherScope.
If it wants.
The Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
Good morning, everyone. About 10 minutes before the top of the hour, big story in the tropics is this incredible hurricane in the eastern Pacific, strongest ever, most intense ever. It's been down to 910 millibars estimated central pressure, and it is sitting to the southwest of Cabo San Lucas. Hurricane Linda. Linda's going to go down in history in 1997 as the strongest hurricane ever, at least until we have another very strong one. And it was in 1939 that a tropical storm that began as a hurricane moved on shore between San Diego and Los Angeles, accounted for about 45 fatalities. There was an incredible amount of rainfall with it and packed winds to 50 miles per hour. That was also an El Nino year. This is also a strong El Nino year. That's one of the reasons this is not going to weaken as rapidly as it might, because the water temperatures of the eastern Pacific are warmer than what they normally are. It's those cold waters that protect the California coastline from these tropical disturbances. Most of them just continue to head on to the west or dissipate before they make landfall, and they move on shore as remnants. If you remember, Ignacio last month in August brought some heavy rain to San Francisco. It was record-setting rain for San Francisco. So this will impact some place north and east, maybe around Southern California, with moisture and rain. Exactly where is too early to tell, but all of anyone that lives in Southern California, Arizona, Central California is going to want to monitor this situation. Certainly people in the Baja and along the west coast of Mexico are monitoring the situation also. Hurricane Linda, as of 8 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time, is centered at 20.7 north and 114.6 west, 335 miles west-southwest of Cabo San Lucas. Its winds are 175 miles per hour. It's incredible. Moving northwest at 13 miles per hour, its estimated barometric pressure 915 millibars. Reconnaissance aircraft may be investigating this today, as we understand, and get a fix on it, but it is really something right now. Rotating about, heading to the northwest, paralleling the coastline of Mexico and the Baja of California. Now, there's a couple of things that are going to influence the current track and the forecast track of Hurricane Linda, and that's this big, deep trough of low pressure. It's deepening and it's heading south rapidly. Hurricane Linda is moving northwest. If Hurricane Linda moves onto the east side of this trough, that trough should have an influence on Linda and divert it toward the east. And if it's diverted toward the east, it's a timing issue as to where this moisture will move on shore. So all the interests in the southwest should certainly monitor the situation closely. There are coastal flood warnings that are in effect for the coast of Mexico and also the Baja from Punta Eugenia to Cabo San Lucas. And the forecast track of this is to move northward by tomorrow night to about 25 north and 119 west. And that means that it's going to be northwest of Cabo San Lucas instead of southwest as it continues its northwesterly track. This is Tropical Depression 15E. It's centered at 14.0 north and 134.5 west. It's about 1,415 miles east-southeast of Hilo, Hawaii. This, over time, could develop into a tropical storm. And it would be slow to develop, but still in all, it's another force to be reckoned with. This is Tropical Storm David. David will probably become a typhoon over the next 72 hours. This is Typhoon Oliva, and that's going to make impact in Japan. Erika, still very strong 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm, centered at 38.3 north and 41.9 west, and it's moving east-southeast and will probably affect the Azores before Erika becomes totally extratropical.
Right there, right at the center of the circulation, the bands of intense rising air motion as the air flows in. And a system of this magnitude, actually, if you go from the ocean surface up to maybe about 10 or 12,000 feet, that's the thickness of the layer of air that's flowing into the center. Once you get above that, the air is going in a circular fashion, but it tends not to get in towards the center any longer. Then as you get to the highest part of the actual hurricane itself, the air is flowing outwards, away a great distance, and it's that flow outwards, the anticyclonic flow, which is favorable for the system to continue this in at the bottom, spiraling up towards the core, and then outwards at the top. As long as that type of profile is set up, the hurricane maintains its overall intensity. That will continue today and into this evening, but eventually later tonight, maybe after midnight, we do expect the hurricane to start pushing over cooler than 80-degree ocean waters. 80-degree we mentioned because it's kind of a threshold for the hurricane continuation as far as the intensity. Once it gets over the less than 80-degree waters, it should start to feel the effects of that, and we should start to get that decreasing trend, which could actually really decrease very quickly as it gets over here. Now, these are low clouds produced by cool Pacific Ocean waters. This is a big area of stratus clouds, and it tells us that, yeah, there are some cooler waters, although because of the El Nino, actually, in terms of compared to, let's say, the average or the norm, it is a bit above normal in this corridor. But again, that threshold of 80 and less than 80, the hurricane will cross that, and then we should see a rapid decreasing in strength.
Update is brought to you by Rayovac.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about what's happening lately with our very powerful Hurricane Linda. You notice the new information here, and I'll tell you what, let me get out of the way here, give you a chance to jog it on down. And you'll notice it's still a good distance west of the Baja, thankfully. But notice how much the maximum sustained winds have been decreased. Now down to 150 miles per hour. It is west-northwest bound at 13 miles per hour. The overall forward speed not reported to have changed significantly. However, the pressures are continuing to rise, at least the estimated minimum pressure up to 930 millibars. Now, we do have coastal flood warnings in effect, and these endpoints have been changed somewhat. So let me go ahead and give you the latest information that we have. The coastal flood warning for the waves and the swells that are going to be generated continuously by the hurricane over the next couple of days, actually. The area warned has changed and now extends from Ensenada del Pabellón to Punta do Estrecho, I think that's Estrecho or Estrecho, on the west coast of mainland Mexico, and from Punta Eugenia, same coordinates here, all the way down to the Baja. So the endpoints have changed somewhat here on the west coast, but pretty much the same as we get out onto the Baja. You can see that well-defined eye, the center of circulation now. Apparently what may be happening, according to the hurricane center, is that the eye itself, the inner eye, is actually starting to erode and collapse. And what we're finding is this much larger eye wall forming. And that's quite common when we have these incredibly intense hurricanes. We can see a collapsing of the inner wall. And what happens then is, if this trend continues, is that this outer eye, the larger of the two circular areas here, this outer eye will become the area of stronger winds eventually, and this inner eye will start to collapse a little bit. If you look at the visible, what we call the high-resolution visible imagery, you can see earlier today that well-defined center, again west-northwest bound here, numerous bands of incredibly intense convection going on, spiraling around and pulsing at different times in different quadrants of the hurricane. But as long as it stays offshore, then at least we don't have to deal with excessive rain for the most part. As you can see, there's not too much rain falling here, nor do we have to deal with the incredibly strong winds, and the radius of hurricane-forced winds actually extend out about 50 miles in all directions from the center. It will move over progressively cooler waters after midnight tonight. The decreasing trend in overall strength is expected to continue. The minimum pressures should gradually come up. The overall maximum sustained wind should start to slide down. And there is much, much cooler water as you head up at a latitude, even let's say with the northern part of the Baja. Again, here's your system. There's the water vapor tracing out this big upper trough off the west coast. And yeah, it is rare, although if you go back to September of 1939, we did have a tropical system actually come into Southern California, the center of impact between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara. Unfortunately, fatalities and quite a bit of damage associated with that tropical storm. Now, there have been several tropical systems that have approached Southern California, but not actually making landfall, classified as tropical storms like this in 39, but we have had, of course, at times a lot of rain pushing into the southwest part of the country. Here's Tropical Depression 15E with the new information westbound. It may become a tropical storm in the next couple of days, as you see on the satellite imagery here. And then as we go a little bit farther to the west, we still have some intense systems in the western Pacific. Typhoon Oliva, which could actually impact southwestern Japan in the next 3 days. Tropical Storm David, which should become a typhoon in the next 24 to 36 hours. Thankfully, we get a break. It is quiet in the Gulf. It's also pretty quiet off the eastern seaboard, but we still have Tropical Storm Erika. Now, we could actually get some tropical storm winds affecting the Azores in the next 48 hours. Sustained winds at 50 miles an hour. It's picked up a little speed, east-southeast bound at 10 miles per hour, starting to lose the daylight here. But again, the Azores could encounter some tropical storm force winds. Hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson scale. West-northwest, 13 miles per hour. We still have coastal flood warnings in effect for the Baja from Punta Eugenia south to Cabo San Lucas, and then along the Mexican coast we also have coastal flood warnings in effect. One of those endpoints is going to be changed to Punta de Estrecho. Here's a look at your satellite picture, and you can see right there at the center of circulation that very well-defined eye, although a little bit more obscured with some high cloud debris. It's tending to make this a little bit more filtered here, not quite as clear of a shot, but definitely on that west-northwesterly jog. Intense convection. Remember, the air is flowing in towards the low-pressure zone during, I'd say about the lowest 10 to 12,000 feet. That's all inflow, air flowing in. Now, the air comes in, and then if you go from the center, from the eye outwards 30, 60 miles, now we start to get a quick spin up of the airflow, and then the exhaust, to some extent, analogy, the exhaust outwards, the outflowing air peeling away. So as long as we have that relationship, lots of inflow up the column and out the top, then we have the favorable setup for this system to maintain its strength. So there is that upper